What's going on, guys? Overman back again. So recently I made it past the halfway point of the main story in The Division, and honestly I don't see what all the hoopla is about. I'm not really disappointed. I pretty much knew what to expect after playing both betas. However, I'm really not impressed by what I've seen in The Division so far. Now I will say that I don't think that the game sucks, but I do have mixed feelings about it, so let me explain. And we'll start off with the god-awful character creator. It's terrible because it barely gives you any options at all, and the result is that you're gonna be finding a lot of long-lost twins in the hubs. I swear, this character creator is only in the game because it's a requirement in a game like this. But if you're gonna do a character creator, at least make it a halfway decent one. And this is especially bad because they keep saying this is an RPG, it's an RPG, which means it's a role-playing game. And it's a lot easier to get invested into your character and roleplay when you have a good character creator. Now, since we're talking about appearances, let me also mention that I do actually like the clothing options that you have for your character. I really like that they have no stats, which allows you to customize your character and make them look however you want, unlike some games I know of. And you can find everything from funny hats to Air Maxes, scarves, jackets, etc. But now that we got that out of the way, let's get to the shit that really matters. I think as a concept, the story in The Division is really interesting and has a lot of potential. However, the execution is pretty meh. The characters are pretty boring and generic, and the cutscenes are barely worth watching. I ran into a couple of NPCs in safe houses that have personality quirks, like one of them is kind of like a new ager, so he'll go tell you to manifest the bad guys out of reality, and another one of them has really bad allergies, so he's always sneezing and blowing his nose and stuff like that. But those quirks get kinda repetitive after a little while, at least for me. Overall, the story seems very subpar, which is a shame because if you go back and watch some of the trailers for this game, which I'll link in the description box below, you'd think that The Division would have a really gritty and heart-wrenching story, but that's definitely not the case. Now, you will find some collectibles throughout the game that really show off the grittiness of the setting, like for example this one piece of found footage that shows a woman trying to hide from the cleaners, but one of them finds her, and yeah. These are really good and they really help to set the scene and immerse you, but I see these collectibles as supplementary to the main story. But the problem is, of course, the main story is booty, so it's not as awesome as it should be. If The Division was a cake, it'd be a cake with great frosting on top, but a kinda shitty cake below. But anyways, the game has you start off in Brooklyn. Yes folks, Brooklyn is in the game. It's the starting area, so if you play the beta, you know how you start off at level 4? Yeah, well that's right after you leave Brooklyn and get into Manhattan. From there on, you'll set up your base of operations, do your main missions, side quests, and encounters. The open world here is pretty standard for an Ubisoft game. The safe houses act as towers, you get to one in an area, and the side activities will pop up on your map. Oddly though, you don't see any of the other players in the open world, and that makes it feel like a regular single player game. And that's strange because this is an always online game, but you don't see anyone else outside of the PvP mode, so it kind of feels like a waste. I mean, one of the issues that people had with the open world in the betas was that they didn't feel alive, and one way to solve that would be to let us see the other players in the open world. I mean, it wouldn't be much, but at the very least we could say what's up to them or something like that, since we do have proximity chat, or at least we could just see them on their way to go and do something, you know? While that's not the greatest solution in the world, I think that would be a lot better than not seeing anyone else at all. And another problem I have with this open world is that it seems very fake. You see the same things over and over again. Sick people in the streets, pedestrians yell at you and tell you that you're intimidating them for no apparent reason. Occasionally you scan someone and give them a chocolate bar and then they'll drop their pants for you. You see the same two hoodie wearing bad guys that are looting a dead body, and when you kill one of them, the other one will scream, "They got Alex!" I'd really like to see more dynamic events in the open world. Like maybe a group of cleaners are walking through the streets burning everyone alive, and you and whatever other Division agents in the area have to stop them or something like that. Now the main missions are pretty decent, and I think that the missions that we got to play in the beta aren't really as good as the missions that you play after that. And that's mostly because the later missions definitely feel more intense, which was a nice surprise for me. And by more intense, I mean that they throw more enemies at you and there's nicer environments to fight in. That's not the biggest improvement in the world, but better than the first couple of missions, no doubt. One thing that I was annoyed and concerned about was fighting the same boss for a few missions. I was worried that this game was gonna pull a Halo 5 and recycle boss fights throughout the whole game, because early on, for like 3 missions or so, the final boss is this same big fat guy with a flamethrower. And it's funny because I was in a group and we got to the end of one of the missions and one of my teammates says,
"Now comes the fat guy."
because at that point we all thought that we were just gonna always fight the same enemy at the end of every mission. Thankfully though, that was the last mission that I played where that fat guy was the final boss. In the last mission that I played, that guy isn't the final boss, but just another enemy that gets thrown into the mix from time to time. Overall, I do enjoy the main missions in this game. I don't think that they're amazing or anything like that, but they're decent enough. My problem is with the side activities. They're incredibly simple, dull, and repetitive. The side missions in this game will usually have you go kill a few lieutenants and that's it. And then there's the encounters, and they come in a few varieties. The most common being rescue the hostages, break up the deal between gangs, and defend the JTF against waves of enemies. These activities are super simple and there isn't anything that really makes them interesting. What makes things worse is that you'll be doing a lot of these side activities in order to level up your character. For example, you're level 10, so you go and do the level 10 mission, and now you're almost at level 11, so you look at the next mission and that's at level 12. So in order to get to level 12, you have to go and run side activities which are repetitive as hell. And you don't just do one, you do multiple side activities to level up. But at least they're easy, so you can get them over with pretty quickly. And the encounters will also reward you with supplies. What are supplies for? Supplies are used to upgrade the 3 wings in your base of operations. Upgrading these wings will give you access to new skills, perks, and talents. Now, this I like, and I think this is one of the stronger points of the game, because the gameplay in The Division is pretty basic. You get into cover, peek out of the cover to shoot the bad guys, reload, rinse, and repeat. So these skills and perks are a much needed layer of depth and customization to the gameplay. To be honest though, it hasn't made the biggest difference in the world so far. Things like the healing box and the turret definitely help you out and improve the experience, but at the end of the day, The Division's gameplay is still basic as bleach. And as a result of that, I find myself playing this game on autopilot because it really doesn't require much thought at all, and personally, I'm not a big fan of that. Now, I do think that it's possible that the gameplay gets better if things get more challenging in the end game. Right now, the most challenging aspect of The Division is just managing the enemy's position, because you don't want a yellow bar enemy getting close to you while you're shooting at another target downrange, because those enemies are spongy as fuck in this game and you aren't. But if you're playing in a group with decent communication skills, things should be no problem at all. In fact, a group with good communication makes things pretty damn easy mode. And if you end up picking up The Division, I highly recommend that you play with a group because it'll be more fun since you guys can work out strategies based on various weapon and skill combinations. For example, maybe one of your buddies wants to use a shotgun, so you'll say, okay, I'll run a machine gun with a big magazine so I can lay down suppressing fire while you run up on them. And maybe you'll have a sniper hanging back picking off key targets, or just weakening enemies enough for the guy with the shotgun. And there's a lot of room to play with your skills when you're playing with a group. You can have some guys focus on damage, so maybe 2 guys in the group will run the pulse with the mod that gives you an extra damage buff to any enemies highlighted by the pulse, and some guys can run turrets for extra damage or at the very least some more suppressing fire. And of course you're going to want to have 1 or 2 guys with healing skills to keep everyone in the group alive. So there's definitely a lot you can do with the group since there's some tactics and strategies that you can take advantage of, but none of that really happens when you're playing solo. Playing by yourself can be incredibly boring because these encounters can turn into a war of attrition. Because the enemies are so spongy, you have to play pretty conservatively, and that can get boring because it's really not that challenging and it doesn't require much skill or thought. Because all you're gonna do is pop out of cover, let a shot off from your marksman rifle, and then go back into cover. Honestly, playing solo really reminds me of playing Destiny, and not in a good way. Thankfully though, we don't have to worry about playing solo too much since we do have matchmaking. You can jump into general matchmaking at any of the hubs, and you can also jump into matchmaking for missions, which is of course good for the aforementioned reasons. And so far, I've had a pretty good experience with matchmaking on the PC. Most of the time, I'm getting matched with people that have mics, and in those cases, I have a pretty good time. But even when I don't get someone with a mic, thanks to the almighty keyboard, we can still communicate, although mics are definitely preferred since you don't have to stop playing just to type something out. So as you may have noticed, there's a few things that I haven't talked about so far, one of them being crafting. And that's mostly because I think crafting is more geared towards the endgame stuff rather than the main story. Because the way it works is that I could spend 5 blue weapon parts and get a rare weapon, but that weapon will come out with stats appropriate for my level. But the thing is, I'm pretty much guaranteed to replace that weapon in a level or 2 because I'll most likely get a better gun as a drop, so it doesn't make much sense to waste my crafting materials right now. It would be much smarter to save my materials for endgame crafting. I also haven't talked about the Dark Zone for similar reasons. I plan on jumping in more once I'm at a higher level, but I'm pretty sure the Dark Zone will be interesting and fun since that was definitely the highlight of both of the betas. So overall, I think The Division is an okay game. I don't think it's anything amazing or impressive. I think it's alright. It's got its ups and downs. The biggest problem for me personally is how simplistic the solo experience is. But obviously, obviously, that may or may not change with the endgame content. And that's why I can't really make a recommendation at this point. I gotta see what the endgame content is like, because unfortunately, the campaign experience here in The Division so far doesn't compare to other games like Mass Effect or The Witcher or Fallout, where the campaign is good enough to be the only thing in the game. That's not the case in The Division. It needs that endgame content. Think back to vanilla Destiny, and imagine we didn't have the Vault of Glass. That would be a big part of the endgame content gone, and that campaign sure as shit was not satisfactory for $60. But here's the thing though, a lot of people didn't do Atheon back in the day, they just did Nightfalls, weeklies, and whatnot, because it would give you a chance at cool loot. And so far, the loot in The Division doesn't seem to be that cool. Now granted, I'm only getting blues and greens here, but of course, The Division is in a totally different setting from Destiny. Destiny allows for more creativity to go into the guns. The Division deals with modern military weapons, so of course, we're not gonna have crazy stuff like Gjallarhorns or Icebreakers, but we'll see once I get to the endgame and get some legendary and high-end weapons. I will say that another problem The Division has going for it is that the guns don't really feel as different as they should. A lot of the fully automatic weapons feel kinda similar, and the same can be said for the semi-automatic stuff as well. And that's not to say that they feel exactly the same, of course not. They have different rates of fire, magazine sizes and whatnot, but they don't feel that different. Like going from an ACR to an M4 or something doesn't really feel too different, you know? I think that might be down to the nature of military gear and the fact that this game is in the third person and you can't really see your weapon all that well, or certainly not as well as you would in a first person game. And in a lot of these other games, one of the biggest differences you'll experience from weapon to weapon is the appearance of the gun. But anyways, I'll continue to play, see what's good with the endgame content, and do at least a few more videos on The Division. But that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash that like button. If you're not feeling too shy, drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think about The Division so far. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow me on Twitter. Link will be in the description box below. That's it for me though, guys. Overman.